and I'll just quickly introduce Amanda. She is a warrior in Canadian law. She's come forward and been extremely active in our groups. You probably already know, or maybe you don't. You might have come to Amanda through her past associations. And I've seen her have some incredible wins right up until this moment. She wanted to tell us a story that of things how she was able to crack the code and show the bad guys how they're going wrong. So unless there's any questions, maybe I'll just let you know if there's any chance for, or pardon me, any questions that you have, you can ask me right now. Just unmute since we're a small group. We did have 30 people sign up, so I'm not sure, you know, if people were mystified by the agreement or whatever. I will be sharing the recording after this workshop, and I'm gifting it to Amanda, so she is free to post it, given that she's just giving her time, and that's very generous. So I just want to make sure nobody doesn't have access to this that wants it. So I think I will just go ahead and turn it over to you, Amanda.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to my story because I don't want to waste people's time. I really just want to jump into the tickets, but I will, if those want to at the end want me to go into my little rant story, I'm more than happy to do that. But I can't wait to see how this is going to pan out because holy cow is all I can say. Like, I'm just gobsmacked. Now, the meeting for today, what I did was I asked Beth if she would be willing to host this platform because I wanted to go over how tickets are done, so people have a better understanding on how to read a ticket, because even people who are currently already in the courts and fighting the courts, they actually don't know how to read the charge. Now, having said that, I'm not going to claim that I'm a legal expert. On the contrary, I'm going to make it very clear to everyone that I'm a private sovereign human living soul. I am self-educated in law. I do not have the authority or the ability to charge for law. I don't ask for money for my time. And all I'm doing is sharing my education with people. It's not to be construed as in any way, shape, or form. And I 100% challenge everybody. Validate what I'm telling you. Don't take my word for it. I'm going to just try and help illuminate a path for you. If it resonates with you, take notes. And then with those notes, validate what I'm telling you for yourself. So with that in mind, I'm going to get started on the tickets. And I've got a whole lot of windows open. Now, Beth, I'm hoping you can, oh, you did. Okay, good. So let me just, first off, here we go. There we go. Before I got this started today, I previously opened up a screen. And I'm going to start sharing my screen now because nobody needs to look at me. And yeah, I think, there we go. Now, if I've done this correctly, I think I have. You should only just see a ticket and only the ticket where it says 3060 in the upper left-hand corner. And you can see I've redacted the ticket. Now, this particular ticket here, and I do apologize for the fact that it's not easy to read. It is a photocopy of a photocopy, and it wasn't even an original. It was the offense notice. So, so what people need to understand is under the Provincial Offenses Act, and I have that also called up. So what I'm probably going to do, I'm just going to switch this over, is I'm going to simultaneously jump back and forth between the Provincial Offenses Act, because I think that is also important. And I'm going to be jumping a lot of screens. So I'm going to start by going over here, and because I've got this window open as well, and switch my screen. So I'm going to stop share for a second and go back to share. So when you get a ticket and you get any kind of provincial ticket, and that's another thing I'm going to qualify right now. Everything I do is from the perspective of Ontario, folks. You're going to have to do your own research if you're not in the province of Ontario, but the concepts are all the same. You just need to go to your province and or your state, determine the rules for your state. So I've got in front of you here the Provincial Offenses Act 1990. I've got the online version in front of me at the moment, and I've got it up in two different ways, but I'm going to start with this one. And for those of you who can see, I always like to go to the one that's on the ontario.ca website /laws/statute. It always comes up white with green trim. I prefer to work with this copy, and the reason why I prefer to work with this copy, I'm going to explain to you right now. When you're looking at a provincial offenses, when you're looking at any act of legislation, one of the first things you're going to see here is a tab that says versions. Okay, the versions tab is going to show you the current date. So the last time this act was updated was November the 29th, 2021. And then below it, you're going to see a previous set of dates, November 1st, 2021 to November 28th, 2021. So what did they do? I don't know. Then before that, July 21st to October 31st. And then you see right below that 33 more. Now I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes, but this is really important and a lot of people don't understand it. So I wanted to show you that. But before I get too heavily into the how to read a ticket, I want to cover a few more things with you with respect to the Provincial Offenses Act. So the Provincial Offenses Act, there are three ways you can commence a proceedings. Okay, commence a proceedings means procedural components that are required to be met in order to commence the proceedings. Now, the first one falls under Part 1, and it's commencement of proceedings by certificate of offense. Now, very quickly, taking a look at this ticket here, it says offense notice. The offense notice is a carbon copy. The certificate of notice, okay, is the original. So when you're pulled over at the side of the road, the police officer pulls out his pad, he puts a carbon in between the offense notice and the certificate of offense, and he writes out the charge before you. He keeps this certificate of notice. He gives you the offense notice, which is what you see before you. But it's the certificate of offense, the original, that is the first step to commencing the proceedings. Now, the second part is commencement of proceedings for parking infractions. Same thing, but I'm not going to go into Part 2 because I'm not going to be talking at all about parking infractions today. And then the third way is Part 3, commencement of proceedings by information. Now, this is a beautiful thing to understand, folks, because you're not commencing a proceedings by a summons. You're commencing a proceedings by an information. So taking a look for a second, and I want you to understand the difference. Commencement of proceedings by certificate of offense. As mentioned, you have the offense notice, which is the carbon copy, and the certificate of offense is the original, the copy that the police officer wrote and kept for himself, which was later to be filed at court. But with a summons, it doesn't work the same way. With a summons, the summons, if you will, is the equivalent of the offense notice, okay? And then the police officer or provincial offenses officer or whoever, they then have to do something called lay an information. And it's a form that says information, and they fill out the details on that information. And the details on the information are supposed to reflect what is on the summons, just like the details on the certificate of offense is supposed to reflect what is on the offense notice. So I know this is detailed, but I want you guys to understand how this all works. So everyone keeps saying that you are under Part 3 because you got a summons. Who gives a shit? Pardon my French. Sorry, Beth. Who gives a crap? It's not.
You can officially swear. You can officially swear in the House of Free Will.
Perfect. But we are recording this, so I should actually watch my manners.
All right.
So going back, and I'm still on the screen for Provincial Offenses Act. It is the commencement of proceedings by either a certificate of offense or an information. That's it. That's how the proceeding, step 1 to commencing of proceedings. Okay. Now, after that, there are there are additional, so you take a look here, I'm on part 1. So you have additional, so part 1 is certificate of offense and offense notice, then issuance and service, then you have service here, and then you have certificate of service. All these little things here that you see, they're all what we call procedural components. All these procedural components must be done in order for the certificate of offense or the information to be complete and regular on its face. That language, complete and regular on its face, is in the Provincial Offenses Act. It is also in the case law that I have been using. So these are all things that you really should understand. Now, what I want to address here is that, so going back, Section 1 of the Provincial Offenses Act says interpretation. Okay, Section 2 is general. It's the purpose of the act. The purpose of this act is to replace the summary conviction procedure for the prosecution of provincial offenses, including adopted by reference to the Criminal Code Canada, with a procedure that reflects the distinction between provincial offenses and criminal offenses. So for this, they always call it quasi-criminal in the provincial offense, in the provincial offenses. And the interpretation, whereas an aid to the interpretation and provisions of this act, recourse is had to the judicial interpretation of practices under corresponding provisions of the Criminal Code Canada. Any variation in wording without change in substance shall not in itself be construed to intend a change of meaning. Okay, so that's Section 1, Section 2, and then we start out with Part 1. Just like to note here that there's no royal assent, by the way, just saying. That's another barrel of fish, or can of worms, or whatever. So Part 1, commencement of proceedings by certificate of offense. It is not the offense notice that is the ticket you're handed that commences the proceedings. It is the certificate of offense, which is the original document, the one that is certified and signed by the officer. So the first section under, and I'm not sure why it's all highlighted on me, but that's whatever. The first section under Part 1 is Section 3.1. In addition to the procedure set out in Part 3 for commencing a proceeding by laying an information, a proceeding in respect of an offense may be commenced by filing a certificate of offense alleging the offense in the office of the court. Now, that is a really, this may mean nothing to you folks, but I've been working on this for weeks, and this is one of the motions that I have got before the court right now, that I've filed a certiorari for the Superior Court to be heard next Monday. In addition, so Section 3.1, the very first, in addition to the procedure set out in Part 3, that means that Part 1, you follow the procedures in Part 1 in addition to the procedures in Part 3, which bind them together, folks. Okay, you cannot complete, and I'm going to repeat this, you cannot complete the procedural components under Part 3 without using Part 1. And I've proven it. I've written all the documentation out, and if there's time at the end, I might even share, it's still in the draft mode, but I might even be willing to share that information. So if you are commencing a proceedings by certificate of offense, you follow procedures in Part 1, and if necessary, go to Part 3. Then you have issuance and service. A provincial offenses officer who believes that one or more persons who have committed an offense may issue by completing and signing the form and prescribed under Section 13. A certificate of offense certifying that offense has been committed. Again, that's the cop's copy. Or B, either an offense notice indicating the set fine for the offense or a summons. There you go. So the issuance and the original mention of summons being issued is under Section 3, subsection 2, subsection B. Okay, so the commencement of the proceedings under Part 1 can be commenced either with a notice of offense or summons, but the notice of offense must have a certificate of offense. And that summons, what does it require? Oh, that's right. It requires the additional procedures set out in Part 3 commencing a proceeding by laying an information.